It is my great pleasure to invite Nora Ahmed Kamal to the stage. Nora completed an MA in somatic counseling psychology in 2016, is a queer cis woman of color from Denmark and Comoros. She is a multilingual somatic therapist and adjunct faculty at Naropa. Nora is committed to ending systemic oppression and empowering people in reclaiming their unapologetic truth. With this aim, she is dedicated to unmasking the many lies that we embody. This presentation is titled, Embodying Our Full Selves with Mindful Lying. Please invite Nora Ahmed Kamal to the stage.
I have something to confess to you. When I got selected to do this Spark Talk, I was so freaking excited. This means that I can talk about lying, my absolute most favorite topic. So I was like envisioning myself on this stage, and I was thinking, oh yes, I'll be empowered, I'll be fierce, I'll be confident. Yeah. The truth is, I've been struggling so much to prepare for this talk. I have had 7 different drafts of speeches. I've had all the ranges of emotions you could possibly imagine, from anger, from frustration, to sadness, to fear, to complete hopelessness. To the point where I was like, I'm just not gonna show up. I'm just gonna say I'm sick. I'm just gonna lie, because that's what the talk is about. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of what lies and self-deception is, I need to be honest with myself. I don't want to pretend that I know this talk by heart. I want to think that I do, but I don't. I don't want to pretend that I'm not nervous, because I am. My heart is beating. And I don't want to pretend that I know it all. Because the truth is, lying has been my greatest suffering. And I believe that having to conceal and not be our full selves is a collective pain. So I've been in a battlefield with somebody, and this battlefield was with my inner liar. My inner liar, I've made her wrong, I've made her bad, I've told her I didn't want to have anything to do with her. And it wasn't until I went to grad school that I realized that perhaps it would be a good idea to befriend her. And so I started getting curious about her. And in my research about the somatic experience of lying, I found out something really important, something really profound. And that is that I don't need for her to go away. I don't need her to disappear. But actually, I need to listen to her closely and listen to what she has to tell me. Because the truth is, whether we like it or not, everyone lies. We lie every day, the statistic shows. And it's like lies are these like tiny little messengers, and they just come to remind us that we experience pain. So today my talk is about uncovering and exploring our inner liar. And it's about looking at the times that we're not able to be honest with ourselves and others. Oh, there is another slide. When we talk about lies, there's actually 2 forms of lies. The first one is called falsify. It's basically to falsify information. So that could be, I'm fine, nothing's wrong, or I'm on my way, or the famous, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. But the one that I'm most interested about is the one we don't talk about. And that's through the act of concealment. To conceal comes from Latin. Concealment means to completely hide. It basically means to not fully show the full truth, to keep something secret. Oftentimes, we know that we're concealing because there's something that we've left to mention. So for example, you could have like multiple truths, right? You're like, oh yeah, this is true, and this is true, and this is true. But sometimes there's one that weighs a little more. And it's oftentimes this one that we don't talk about, and this is the one where we conceal. So let's take a couple of examples. So you stop working at a job. When someone asks you, so what happened? You say, it was just not a supportive environment, and I was really stressed. And both of these are true, right? But the reality is that you got laid off. The other example is, let's say you stop dating someone. When you tell the person that you no longer want to date, you tell them, I just have a lot going on right now in my life, so I can't do this dating piece. And it might be true that you do have a lot going on, right? But really, you're just not that interested. And to be able to say that perhaps would mean that this person wouldn't like you, or you might even hurt them. So, why is it that we lie? Lying. I love the word, just lying. There's like such charge to the word, at least for me. Because it's so tabooed, it's so shadowed, which leads that there's no space for you to even share the truth. There's no room for, I made a mistake, or actually, I didn't tell you about this thing. And the reason we lie is there's two ways that we lie. One way is through we avoid. So we'll just say, oh, my phone was off. Yeah, it was dead, because we didn't want to respond to that text. Or we want to obtain something, right? So we're like, yeah, I'm fluent in Spanish. I'm totally great at that, to try to get the job. Because lying is a survival mechanism. It doesn't really matter whether or not this is a real threat. Our nervous system does not differentiate between real and perceived threat. So this means that when there's a risk for us to lose connection, the need for acceptance is stronger than the need to be honest. This means that we choose deception, including self-deception, over integrity. So the reality is that honesty is so incredibly uncomfortable. And I would avoid at any possible means to have you be mad or disappointed at me. And what we do in that moment is that we are actually preventing a natural experience to occur. And that natural experience is suffering. I don't want to be with your suffering because I don't want to be uncomfortable. You might be like, no, but I don't want you to be uncomfortable. That might be true, but really you don't want to be uncomfortable. So I've come up with something to work with our inner liar. It's called mindful lying. And you might be like, mindfulness and lying, that can't go together. Well, it can, in my opinion. It's a somatic and contemplative practice on how to engage on a more deep, authentic way with ourselves as well as others. So the first step is to listen closely to our bodies. Our bodies is constantly communicating with us. And so when we bring mindfulness to our bodies and we start paying attention, we can start noticing the pit in our stomach or the throat constriction or the way that our heart is beating faster. And all of those are clues to the somatic experience of lying. Or as Martha Graham would say, the body never lies. It always informs us of what is going on. So it's a bit similar to meditation, right? You're sitting on your cushion and you're like, okay. And you know, like it's important to bring gentleness in that moment. So a thought occurs and then you're like, oh, a thought. And then you let it go. And it's similar to when we start discovering how much we self-deceive. We might just be like, oh, I lie. Or, oh, I just concealed. And it's important to bring gentleness in that process. So a way to know that you're concealing is through the smile. As Paul Ekman says, the smile is the mask most frequently employed. Paul Ekman is a psychologist and researcher. So you might think, you know, you're in a group and people are talking and someone says something and you did not find that funny. But you'll just smile or you'll even laugh, right? Because what Paul Ekman says is that it's actually harder to conceal an emotion than to falsify information. This means that it's actually easier to put on a joyful mask than to hide our sadness. So, one of my favorite words, the next step is making space for our lived experience. One of my favorite words is congruence. It basically means in harmony with. So in this step, we actually allow ourselves to listen to what's happening on our internal experience to be in harmony with our external experience. So we really allow those two to go and to become congruent. So I have a story about that. So the other day, actually, in the last week, this has happened a lot. I've been running into people or meeting people, and I just don't want to listen to them. That's just the truth. So I run into this person, and she comes over to me. She's like, hey, Nora, did you get my email? And I'm like, yeah, I just haven't had the time to respond to your email. Lie. And I'm like, she then starts talking, and she just goes on and on and on, and she's talking. And I'm there with my partner, and I'm just standing. And I just noticed that I'm like slowly moving away, and I'm just constricting. And it's as if everything she's saying is just like a blur. I'm like, da-da-da-da-da, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, when is this ever going to end? And finally, she leaves. And so she leaves, and we're sitting at a coffee shop, preparing for SparkTalk. And I'm like, we gotta go. So Ray and I, my partner, we start leaving, and I start engaging in a fight. So I'm like, Ray, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you interrupt her? Why didn't you set a boundary? Why did we have to listen to her? And I just go on and on and on while Ray's like, And until the moment where I realize that I'm not mad at Ray. I'm mad at myself. I'm mad that I wasn't able to express my truth, that I wasn't able to just say, please, can you just be quiet? Or I don't want to have this conversation right now. And so the moment that I was able to express that, my body was able to further express it and deepen and to let go, and I started crying. And then the beautiful thing is then Ray was like, Nora, let's do some pushing exercise. And then we did some pushing exercises. And then we laughed, and then we had a great time, and then it was beautiful. So the next step, the final step, is discernment. It's about choosing when to be honest and when to conceal, to actually make a deliberate choice about this. And of course, it's important, the most important thing in this is to be honest with ourselves first. And then we discern, like, am I going to talk to this person? Because as my all-time favorite person, Brené Brown, she says, you share with the people who've earned the right to hear your story. So it's not everyone that you're going to speak to. It's not everyone you're going to engage in that level of intimacy. So that's up to you to decide within yourself. But when you do lie, Make the lie explicit within yourself, within your body. So for example, you tell your boss, I'm sick, I'm not going to come to work today. In that moment, it's not about afterwards being like, well, I'm kind of sick, I have a little bit of a headache, or it's a little bit of a sore throat. But actually just be like, you know what? I lied because I need a self-care day, and if I say that to my boss, the person's not going to understand, especially here in this country. So I also want to name that it takes so great courage to finally do this, to actually go into conversation with your closest and be like, hey, I need to tell you this thing. And when you do, it can have such transformative experience, and it can actually allow you to deepen into the relationship. But one thing that's so important for me to name is in my work as a therapist, is that what I've realized that not everyone can share their truth. Because being honest is a tremendous privilege. To be our full selves, the truth is actually not safe to reveal and can have serious consequences, from loss of a job, loss of a relationship, or in very serious situations, being killed. So anyone in this room or anyone with a marginalized identity knows the pain of not being able to fully share all of your identities, to not fully share your truth. And so in my work at Queer Asterisk, where we predominantly work with trans folks, one of the beautiful things I've seen is that people are willing to travel from far. They're traveling out of state to come here to Boulder, to come to Queer Asterisk. And the reason for that is because it's a space where they actually can feel a little more of congruence. They can feel a little more safe. Perhaps not fully, but just a little more. And that's the goal. The goal is for us to just experience that level of tiny more of congruence. So one thing that is so important to name that most people not realize is that actually concealment deprives others from choice. What does that mean? You deprive from the people that you're in relationship with having choice, especially the closest people you have. In the moment when you're concealing, you are actually diminishing their ability to be with suffering. So let's take an example of a monogamous marriage, right? Where one person starts having feelings for someone else. In that moment, the person doesn't want to say it because what could be the consequences of that? In that moment, you're actually depriving your spouse from being with that suffering and from having choice, from whatever that is, to having a break, to getting mad, whatever that looks like. So you're robbing the experience of being with what is true. And what's important to know is that as beings, we have these intuitions. So I will know in my body when someone's concealing to me. I might just feel it in my stomach, or when I'm concealing, I might feel it in my throat. So when we don't admit to these things, we actually have this crazy-making thing that we start creating, that the person is like, oh no, that's not true, when it actually is true. So finally, what I want to share is that when we admit to ourselves who we really are and have the courage to be honest to ourselves about it, we have the opportunity to be more authentic with ourselves, to experience more congruence, to experience release in our bodies, and to have more authentic relationship with self and others. Thank you.